Howdy, folks. My name is Miss Sinclair, and this is Miss Sinclair's History. Today, we are continuing to learn about AP US history. We started with topic 1.2 in period 1, which goes from 1491 to 1607. Today, we are going to be talking about topic 1.3 and 1.4. They're both relatively small, and so I'm combining them. Again, if you've taken my class, this is exactly the same thing you heard in class. This is intended to be a resource for students who might have absences, might need to hear the information again. It's long form, but I'm hoping it's a resource for you. So let's get started. Once again, I apologize for my not slick presentation, but hey, I'm just a high school teacher. This is about as good as I get. So topic 1.3 and 1.4. A quick reminder that the AP test will not ever do a DBQ on Unit 1. And that typically it makes up about 1 to 3 questions, or not 1 to 3 questions, about 3 questions on the multiple choice part. So if you're just listening to this, or if you're watching, I would love for you to think back to what you already know. Can you name and describe 3 different Indian tribes, 3 separate indigenous groups already living in North America? Can you remember the name of the tribe, what part of the country they lived in, where they hunted, what kind of agriculture they participated in, anything about their religious life or their political life? Use this as sort of a question to get yourself thinking. Because today we are going to be looking more at European side of things. So let's begin. We'll be looking at European exploration in America, as well as the Columbian Exchange, Spanish exploration and conquest. So that means we have 2 objectives. You will be able to explain the causes of exploration and conquest in the New World by various European nations, as well as the causes of the Columbian Exchange and the effect on Europe and the Americas during the period after 1492. So why does Europe even care? Why does Europe want to explore? Well, there's a few things you should know about European motivations, and it all has to do with the Middle East. After the Black Death, which is going to be 1346, 47, 48, its plague will show up periodically again throughout the rest of the century. But the Black Death kills 50% of many major cities, Florence, Siena, London. It kills like 1/3 of all of Europe. And as Europe has climbed out of that, it has really changed things. For one thing, it has given them some demographic wiggle room. So demography is the study of population. I just finished a fantastic book on the Black Death. If you're interested in learning more about it, I recommend reading The Great Mortality. Very interesting. But prior to the Black Death, Europe was like on the cusp of their carrying capacity, their ability to feed and provide for its population. Now they have a little bit of wiggle room. And with that, workers are no longer tied to the feudal land system because everyone needs workers. And so serfs are just leaving the land, their manor, and are going to find work where they'll actually be paid more. So this has meant more people are moving to cities. You start to see this revival of urban life and trade as Florence and Venice start really pushing that cross-Mediterranean trade. You start to see this alliance between merchants and rulers as more of the wealth starts coming from trade as opposed to only land. And you have a struggle with the Islamic powers as they grow in the Middle East, right? So one thing to know is that in terms of medieval life, Europe is kind of embarrassing, right? What's happening in the Middle East with the Ottoman Empire is just like way more dramatic. It's way more beautiful. They're having the scientific breakthroughs. They're having the artistic breakthroughs. They are having the academic breakthroughs. Their cities are better organized. They have better sewer systems, right? It's gorgeous. And the US feels like, or not the US, Europe feels like it's falling behind. So there's this big concern that the Ottoman fleet will just like hop in boats and sail across the Mediterranean to try and take Europe. It's a valid reason. The Iberian Peninsula had just been reclaimed with the Reconquista. That means they had pushed out all of the Muslim rulers out of Spain. North Africa is still controlled by Muslim rulers, and Europe's easy pickings in a lot of ways. Along with that, though, with the Crusades, with the increase in trade, Europe is also just being reintroduced to the wider world, to Greek philosophy, to Chinese silks, and they want to try and access these trade resources. It all comes down to money, and a lot of it comes down to the Ottoman Empire. Why? Well, if you want to access that hot market that is the Indian Ocean Trade Network, that's Asia, China, India, South Pacific, Southeast Asia, the Middle East, all of that African coastline. The only way Europe can access that is by paying through the nose to the caravans that go through the Ottoman Empire. So there's economic motivations. We would like to access this market, please and thank you, without having to pay so much to this middleman. There's military motivations. We are worried that the Ottomans are going to attack us. We would like to find allies and, again, another trade route so we can maybe like attack them from behind. There are intellectual motivations. We want to know more. We feel behind. And all of these things are going to be combined to cause European exploration. All right, so it starts in Portugal. It starts in Portugal with Henry the Navigator. Henry, who was not a navigator, he's the king, and he is going to really focus on discovery, the destruction of the Muslim world, and wealth. So Portugal, if you know your European geography, and if you don't, you got to get a map. Guys, history classes will get to be so much easier once you learn your geography. So Portugal is it's part of the Iberian Peninsula. So Europe, you got like the boot that is Italy, and then you have the little square that is the Iberian Peninsula. That's Spain and Portugal. Now, if this is Spain, this little bit right here is Portugal, right? It is on the coastline. It doesn't have a lot of great agricultural land. It's predominantly based off fishing. So it would be really easy for them to launch a bunch of ships. Henry creates a school for exploration, to study navigation, to study some of these new navigation tools like the astrolabe coming from the Middle East. And he will organize and fund expeditions along the coast of Africa. He will actually hire a lot of Jewish cartographers who are familiar with the Arab maps. He'll really push the use of the magnetic compass and the astrolabe. He will encourage sailors to use the astrolabe to find their position using the sun or the stars. And they'll be using a ship known as the caravel. It's small, it's maneuverable, it's great for fighting. So he's going to sponsor 50 separate missions. Why? Scientific curiosity. Got to spread that Christianity and financial interest. So as he starts exploring down south, right? He's not going across the Atlantic. He's just going down Africa. He will start to encounter small islands, the Azores and the Madeira Islands, the Canary Islands, and Portugal will make these colonies. And on these colonies, they will start to grow cash crops, sugar, tobacco, cotton. The goal is to eventually reach India, right? Gotta hit that trade route. But they start to get interested in the slave labor coming from Northwest Africa. So let's look at this map. You gotta know your maps. All right. If you are listening to this on an audio version, I apologize. I'm going to take a moment to describe a map here. So this map shows Afro-Eurasia. So you see Africa, Europe, Asia, and the map sort of ends with Australia. And this map depicts trade routes and the Portuguese explorers. So the map shows that there are already established trade routes. There are the Silk Road routes that go overland from China to Samarkand, to Baghdad, eventually to Constantinople, and then up into Europe. You also see the sea routes that are already established, starting in Tokyo, bouncing along the Chinese coastline to Canton, going through Malacca, which is where Indonesia essentially meets Thailand, Calcutta, up the Persian Gulf again, and then you need to hit that land route, Baghdad, Constantinople to Europe. There's also trade routes along the sea that go down the Red Sea, down the African coast to Zanzibar, but no one is making it around the Cape of Good Hope until you get these Portuguese guys. So in 1434, Henry sends your first explorer past the Strait of Gibraltar. That's basically this small space where between Africa and the Iberian Peninsula. And they start to sort of make their way down the African coast. African traders and kings are going to be excited to see these Portuguese traders. Why? Well, because sub-Saharan African tribes are also stuck in a monopoly situation. They also want to get their goods to market, but they have to pay through the nose for these caravans who are willing to cross the Sahara Desert. It's expensive, and if they can find a way to access the European and Asian markets without having to pay those guys, that'd be great. More profits all around, right? So you start to see this trade relationship between Portugal and West Africa. And they quickly realize that the most lucrative trade item is going to be slaves. Slavery in Africa before Europeans arrived was much more of the kind of slavery you saw in the Roman civilization or among the Greeks, right? They were criminals, they were debtors, they were war captives. Slaves worked in your household and they had well-defined rights. We will talk a lot about how what will exist in the Americas is chattel slavery and how it is very distinctly different than previous forms of slavery, right? Slaves in Africa could own property. They could marry free people, and often they became free over time. It was just one of many forms of labor. So as West African states began to trade with the Portuguese, they will form different relationships, right? You'll see that the Benin has an elaborate bureaucracy and a large city. They establish a royal monopoly of trade with the Portuguese, trading ivory, pepper, textiles, beads, slaves. And in return, the Portuguese are handing over copper, brass, glass, horses. So you see a mix of commercial, military, and religious exchanges. We will see that Benin will cut off trade with the Portuguese in the 1500s. If you've watched any of my world history lectures, you know that the Portuguese will end up making it all around Africa, and they're going to be kind of jerks about it. They are going to sort of act more like pirates in the Indian Ocean than partners. But what about Columbus? What about Spain? Well, Spain at this point is full of religious zeal, passion, and a desire for riches. So you had just had the Reconquista, which is when they finally finished pushing the Muslims out of Spain. So you have Queen Isabella, who's really the brains and the brawn behind the throne, and her husband Ferdinand, who's pretty useless, but they cut a deal to allow Isabel to do sort of more of what she wants. And the deal is Ferdinand's name comes first on all the documents. So everyone's like, King Ferdinand. History remembers him as like the great one. And it's like, no, Isabella was the one who had all the brains. Read a great biography on her as well. Totally recommend it. So in 1492, Christopher Columbus, an Italian from Genoa, shows up in Portugal first and is like, hey, want to give me some money so I can sail across the ocean? I think I'm going to reach India. And they're like, haha, no, we're good. So he shows up in Spain. He's like, hey, want to give me some money? And they're like, okay. Christopher Columbus will make 4 voyages from Spain to the Americas ultimately. He will open the way for Spanish conquest and colonization. He will start an exchange of disease that will be devastating to the peoples in the Americas. He was also kind of a jerk. He doesn't make many friends. He's arrogant. So not a great guy all around. When he sails across the Americas, the Atlantic Ocean, reaches the Americas, he gets back and he's like, I claimed this land for Spain. And the Portuguese were like, whoa, 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 what about us? Excuse me, Senor Pope. Like, can you give us some help here? So the Pope divides the world with the Treaty of Tordesillas. And it essentially says everything west of this line until you get to Asia, basically, belongs to the Spanish. And everything east of this line belongs to the Portuguese, and to which the rest of the world goes, what the heck, man? It essentially means that Brazil will go to the Portuguese and the rest of the Americas will go to Spain, according to the Pope, which is one of the reasons why Brazil still speaks Portuguese to this day. Trivia question: where do most Portuguese speakers in the world live? It's not Portugal, it's Brazil. Where do most Spanish speakers in the world live? It's not Spain, it's the Americas. Okay, so what are some of the characteristics of this exploration that we're starting to see? Well, we see breakthroughs in technology. We see the use of the magnetic compass, the astrolabe, the caravel. We see the use of chartered companies. These chartered companies are going to be groups of private investors who will pay an annual fee to either France or England in exchange for a trade monopoly. We're going to see that the rest of Europe follows Spain and Portugal pretty quickly. France will head to Canada, England to North America. We're also going to see unequal labor systems. So whether it's indentured servitude or slavery, human labor is vital for producing low-cost goods. With the population loss that we see in the Americas due to the Columbian Exchange, we need a new labor force, hence slaves. Now, I think one thing is interesting to think about and to talk about is Europe at this time is getting rid of the feudal system, which is in itself an unequal labor system. Now, in the Enlightenment and even to this day, Europe like will often pat itself on the back and be like, oh, we're so good. Like we got rid of that feudal system. Like we're so free citizens and they can vote and like free speech and all that jazz. Well, not really. You just essentially shifted, hit my mic, shifted your unequal labor system to another continent. It's not like you stopped abusing and exploiting humans for your own comfort and your own convenience. It's just that you moved that exploitation out of sight. History is interpretation. And I didn't say that last video, but I really should have. If there's going to be a thesis statement for my YouTube channel, for my podcast, for my class, for any sort of history instruction I do, it should be history is interpretation. There is more than one way to look at any event in history. I want you to take a moment to think about something. Think about the first day of school. Think about sitting in that classroom with 29 other kids and the teacher. Now, if I was going to ask you to describe what happened on the first day of school in that classroom, you would list off a bunch of events. Now, if I was going to ask your classmates what happened on that first day of school, they're also going to list off a bunch of events. And a lot of those events are going to be the same. The teacher went over the syllabus, they assigned seats, I wrote down some stuff, I took some notes. But there's going to be some distinct differences, right? How did you feel on that first day of school? Some of you might be like, I was really excited. I'm looking forward to school. I can't wait to see my friends again. I heard this teacher's really cool. Like, I love learning about history. Some students, though, are going to be like, it was the worst. I hate the first day of school. I hate the icebreakers. I felt like I was going to vomit the entire time. I was so anxious. I just started at this school. I don't have any friends. I don't know who to talk to. Everyone already seems to have friend groups established. Or maybe I hate school. I hate that I have to be here. This is a waste of my time. I'm going to study microbiology. Who cares about US history, right? What a waste of my time. These are different interpretations of the same event. So historians will look at multiple primary sources, multiple accounts of what happened that day to try and give us a fuller picture. And a historian might look at all the accounts of all the students in the class and be like, look, most people were pretty excited about it, so it must have been a good day. But some of the historians might be like, I'm going to focus on this minority of voices who felt sick and who were angry and anxious. I'm going to tell the first day of school story from their point of view. Why does any of this matter? Well, there's a great TED Ed video called History versus Christopher Columbus, which sort of weighs the merits. On one hand, Christopher Columbus set in motion a series of events that will lead to the devastation of civilizations, millions of people's death. It will lead to the creation of a chattel slave system that will systematically enslave and abuse millions of people. But he also connected the Americas with the old world. He will set in motion a chain of events that brings over food supplies that will stabilize the global population and allow it to grow. It will allow for new communities to be born, for the American system to be created, right? If we didn't have Christopher Columbus, the world today and all of its strengths would also not exist, as well as some of its weaknesses. So how do we remember Christopher Columbus? Was he all bad or was he all good? Well, history is kind of gray. Yes, he was very, very bad in a lot of ways. But he also led to the creation of some really good things too. So it's a mixed bag. And this video does a good job of explaining it. This is also a very silly video. I recommend you look it up. It said, "Do you have a flag?" by Eddie Izzard. It's just a joke. So I'm not going to spend time on it, but it's funny. All right, let's take a moment to think. It's been a lot of me talking so far. Let's see how much you have actually absorbed. What were the main factors fueling the European age of expansion? Why did Europe want to expand? An easy way to remember an answer to this, and what you'll often hear teachers talk about is, apologize, God, gold, and glory. One of the things that is going to be set into motion by the discovery of the Americas is something called the Columbian Exchange. It is an exchange of plants, animals, diseases, and technologies between the New World and the Old World, the Americas and Afro-Eurasia. So, what are some of the things that were exchanged? Well, I don't have slides for this. Sorry about that. Well, you have foods. So the New World will provide foods like potatoes, tomatoes, corn, vanilla, copper, cocoa, avocados, tobacco, pumpkins, peanuts, cashews. You will see a population boom after the Columbian Exchange begins because of the diffusion of these products. Well, what did the Old World give the New? Peas, tea, rice, sugarcane, wheat, lettuce, coffee, citrus, apples, bananas, garlic, onions, opium. Settlers will bring sort of these staple crops of European agriculture to the New World. And they'll also introduce Asian and African cash crops, as well as animals, right? What does the New World give the Old? Turkeys, llamas, alpacas, the guinea pig. But more importantly, the Old World will provide horses, goats, pigs, sheep, cows, chicken, rabbits. Now, there's going to be a huge ecological impact from all of this. Let me give you an example. Along with the crops will come over bugs. And since the Americas had been so ecologically isolated from the Old World, it's not just the humans in the Americas who don't have natural defenses, right? Fungus and insects will devastate the American populations, right? Grazing animals will trample Amerindian farms. But some indigenous peoples will take advantage of the new animals, right? The Navajo will become sheep herders. The Plains Indians will use the horse to hunt more buffalo than ever before. But then, of course, you have disease, right? The New World will give STDs to the Old, right? Syphilis and hepatitis. But of course, we are all much more aware of what the Old World gave the New. Smallpox, plague, cholera, influenza, leprosy, malaria, measles, typhoid, yellow fever. It's going to be devastating. So if you look at the demographic impact of this, again, demography is the study of population. We see that smallpox and measles will kill 50 to 80% of the indigenous population. It means the complete destruction of Amerindian societies. Have you ever thought about like, oh, what if it's a zombie apocalypse or it's a nuclear apocalypse? How would I survive? My skill set is fairly useless. Except I remember history, right? My job is history. So I can tell the new generations that have survived after the zombie apocalypse of what the world was like before all of that happened. But imagine if every history teacher, every person over the age of 20 died. How? Like you would remember a little bit of history, but like so much knowledge would just be lost. Traditions, also practical knowledge. How do you build a bridge? I don't know. How do you fix that thing now that it's broken? How do you create that cake again? Grandma had the recipe memorized and she was teaching it to me, but I don't remember, right? It leads to the complete destruction of Amerindian societies. So it's useful to look at things visually as well as just hearing them. So this image on the screen, I apologize to just my listeners, shows just the things I have described, the foods, animals, and diseases moving from the Americas to Europe, as well as the food, animal, and diseases moving from Afro-Eurasia to the Americas. And if you want a little exercise, something to help cement the Columbian Exchange into your head, I'd recommend pausing the video, or once we're all done, taking a moment to create a little picture yourself. My students always filled out a daily cover page. You aren't, obviously. But draw a little picture. Draw a turkey and some corn and some sweet potatoes, right? Draw skull and crossbones. Create a visual. And creating this visual uses a different part of your brain and will help you remember the information, even if it feels silly and you're like, I'm not an artist. I don't care. I'm not seeing it. I'm not grading it. I'm not posting it. Take the moment for yourself. Take the recommendation of an experienced teacher. It will help you remember the stuff. If nothing else, you'll remember, oh yeah, I drew that dumb looking turkey. It didn't look like a turkey at all. Just trace your hand, right? We've been to kindergarten. All right, again, there's a great video from Crash Course on the Columbian Exchange. There's in fact a really good one from Crash Course Scientific History to really look at the ecological impact, as well as World History's Crash Course on the Columbian Exchange and Crash Course US History. All right, let's talk a little bit about conquest. All right, in Central America, you have Hernando Cortez going into Mexico, partnering with the neighboring tribes to conquer the Aztecs in 1519. The Aztecs were not very friendly. They had conquered and enslaved neighboring tribes, often taking captives and sacrificing them as human sacrifices in their religious rituals. So their last leader welcomed Cortez, and then he killed them all. This wasn't necessarily legal. I mean, conquest and legality of conquest and like murder aside, Cortez didn't have permission from the governor of Cuba, who was the guy in charge of the Americas, to do that from Spain. But he's one of our classic conquistadors. He's greedy for money. He's greedy for glory. He was sort of a nothing in Spain, but now he's a big deal. Similarly, Francisco Pizarro will conquer the Incas in 1529. So the Incas, think Peru. Their empire was based off ideas of kinship and family and shared identity. They had a diverse geographic region to conquest. Here's the thing. By the time the Spanish arrived, the Inca had just finished up a brutal civil war, so they're already weakened. Then you add smallpox and measles. Then you have a succession issue. Who's going to be king? Finally, as like all settled, enter Pizarro. Pizarro kidnaps the king, says, if you fill this entire room with gold and silver, I'll let your king go. The Incas do it. He kills the king anyway. These conquistadors were jerks, to say the least. People in history have used much stronger language than jerk, but I am your friendly high school teacher, so I want to try and keep this a little PG. The Spanish conquest is best left for world history, but it's brutal. All right. I don't have any practice questions for you today. I use practice questions from the College Board's website. So if you're taking an AP class with a teacher in a high school, you should have access to AP Classroom, and you should use their practice questions. But I do have a summary question for you. So I would once again recommend that you write a response to these two prompts. Use this as a self-assessment tool. Do I actually know the information, or did it just go through one ear and out the other without ever stopping at my brain? So Please explain the causes of exploration and the conquest of the New World by various European nations. And please explain the causes of the Columbian Exchange and its effect on Europe and the Americas during and after the period of 1492. So we are practicing the historical thinking skill of causation. How did this cause this? It's not just enough to be like, it did. Okay, why? Explain it, describe it. And you can't explain something in one sentence. What caused explain the causes of, I don't know, a volcano eruption? I can't be like, a volcano erupted because of earth tectonic movements. Sure, that's not wrong, but that doesn't explain anything. I don't understand how tectonic movements causes a volcanic eruption. You need more. Explain it as if your grandma's reading this and has never heard about the Columbian Exchange before. She should be able to understand what caused it after reading your little paragraph. Thank you for listening, guys. I love teaching. If you have any questions, please let me know. Have a great day.